Good morning, everyone, and welcome to Evion Group's quarterly webinar. Today, it will be hosted by Managing Director David Round, who will provide an overview of the past quarter and give an overview also of what is coming ahead for the company as it progresses its graphite ambitions. Without further ado, I'll now hand over to Managing Director David Round to take you through a small presentation. At the end of the presentation, there will be a Q&A session for questions that we've received in the lead up to the webinar, but also you are able to raise questions during the webinar, which we can put to David at the end. I'll now hand over to David.
Thanks, Gareth. It's a little bit of a presentation we've put together for today. Some of these slides I used for a recent presentation to the EU, which was held this time last week, which was great. That's an overview of Evion's positions and our global reach in the graphite industry. Obviously, we have number one, we have a joint venture operation in India, which has now been producing since early this year. It's projected for further growth going forward. I outlined in the quarterly report that we're ramping up the stage 2 expansion. We expect to over the next few months. We're seeing a lot of demand for expandable graphite coming out of our operation, given China's resistance to export graphite globally. That's going to help us with cash flow and strong cash flow we project by the end of the year. We're really happy with our developments in India. We've secured our first sale into the US, which is evidence of the US needing material from sources outside of China because of tariffs and a range of other matters. We expect demand for our material and supply to the US to expand rapidly over the next year. I can see we're waiting for some future orders to be confirmed. That's India. Madagascar has been an exciting period for Madagascar with our work with Madagascar, coordinating that with the EU. We submitted our proposal to the EU to be recognised as one of their critical projects almost a year ago now. And we did this in conjunction with the Malagasy Mines Ministry. They were very supportive of us. They've had ongoing dialogue with the EU. And, we were the only graphite project in Africa and awarded such recognition. So it's a testament to the quality of the project. It's testament to Madagascar and its ability and its demand for working really closely with the EU as being a preferred supplier of graphite going forward over the next few decades. We have our battery anode material scoping study that we concluded for Germany. That's available for us to look at implementing after the initiation and development of Mannery. It's something we'd really like to have a position in the global market for. Having our relationship with the EU, we think positions us really strongly to develop our BAM plant going forward in the medium term. A little bit about Madagascar. Our project is largely centred around the sort of middle south of the country, not far from the next source operation, which I now think has a market cap of well over Canadian $100 million. The benefit that we've had since completing our feasibility study a couple of years ago is that the government, in conjunction with the World Bank, have recently made some announcements around substantial upgrades to the infrastructure and roads in that area. Now, we're going to do some updates to our feasibility study because we believe these extensions of roads and ports that are happening in Madagascar in the south are really going to benefit us financially, logistically, for work in that region. It's going to provide a gateway. This part of Madagascar is earmarked by the World Bank and EU as being a massive growth area. There'll be substantial hundreds of millions of dollars of investment made by the EU and World Bank. They've talked about that, made announcements about that. In fact, when I was in Madagascar in March, I met with the African country director of the World Bank, and he outlined all of this for me. So it's an exciting time for the country. Evion's a great beneficiary of those developments. That was some of the data that we released a couple of years ago around our DFS and the numbers that are available. It's a resource that's available to be mined for 21 plus years. We've actually only explored and resourced around 10% of our total footprint in Madagascar. So the ability to extend our mine life is quite live. We've got a high quality, high grade graphite mine, around high 6% of total TGC, which is fairly high in graphite mining. It's a hard rock deposit, which people think is a challenge. It's actually quite the opposite. Having worked in a saprolitic graphite mine deposit where graphite separation from clay is a real problem, in a hard rock deposit, it is the separation and the mining processes are generally a lot easier. So we believe, these financial results are very attainable. We're going to look at updating some of these over the next short term. Extending a mine life is quite an easy task for us. It makes the value proposition for the company even better. Where we're at the moment around our achievements to date, I'm really pleased with the work we've done over the last 6 months in country. We've made some announcements recently about having 100% community acceptance for our project. This week, in fact, there's a ceremony between the politicians, mines minister, and a number of dignitaries in our region at our proposed site to complete the formalities around our environmental permitting and our licenses and community acceptance. We're very grateful to the community that worked closely with us over the last 6 months about the benefits to both of us of developing Mannaree. We'll look to employ a lot of people in the region. We're looking at building a hospital and medical centre. We'll obviously extend schools we've invested in. So there's a big win-win for the community. So I'm really excited about our permitting and licensing finally being approved in the short term. As far as operating licenses and building, construction, mining licenses, we're very close to having those concluded. I'm heading to Madagascar in about a week and a half to hold some higher level meetings with the mines minister and president. So we expect some positive outcomes over the next 2 to 3 weeks. That, I guess, then moves us into the next steps of offtake partners and financing. And in relation to that, the EU recognition is a company maker in my mind. We had a wonderful meeting with the EU representatives, our team that are supporting us in Brussels last Tuesday. We've got about a team of 5 or 6 in the EU office in the Brussels and Madagascar working with us. I've been invited to attend their office in Europe through the latter half of September. We've got a list of potential finance partners they want to talk with, they'd like us to talk with. We're talking with offtake partners in the background. The stars are aligning very rapidly and strongly around financing for the group. We've also advanced our grant application and funding mechanism for some of the early stage costs with Mannaree, and we're very close to concluding that with our partners at the EU. So, look, things are aligning very well with the work we're doing in Europe, which is wonderful. These are some of the points we outlined to the EU in our present. This is actually a page that I took to them last week and said some of the things we need their work. We'd like to engage with them on, and this is part of their mandate to support us. We're working very closely in community around programs and grant funding for community development programs, and some capex is required. Offtake partners and OEMs. We've had some very strong inquiries over the last few weeks from some OEMs and funding partners in Europe. We're working through those and validating some of those to make sure they're the best fit for Evion, largely, and the best fit for the material that we're about to produce. So I will be in Europe with our mandated corporate advisors in the back half of September. We're about to sign some mandates for appointment of some key corporate advisors in Australia and globally in Europe that'll work with us closely with the EU in tying up offtake and financial plans. So that's I guess that's Madagascar, Gareth, and the EU. It's been an exciting quarter for us in that respect. India dovetails perfectly into our operation in that over time our India operation will take around 10 to 15% of our material produced at Mannaree, and it's not lost on our friends in the EU that all of our material to date, apart from our future sale to the US, is all sold into the EU. So that's a great benefit to our company. We see going forward that most of our material will continue to be sold into the EU to manage our relationships there, but we have an enormous demand out of various parts of Asia and the US, and our stage 2 production upgrade will fulfill that. We're seeing prices in the graphite sector grow rapidly. There's the impact of tariffs is creating this global demand. Product is becoming a shortage. China's reluctance and resistance to export not just concentrate but other downstream products to Europe, other parts of Asia and the US is creating this dislocation in supply and demand. So we're seeing I'm seeing some really strong price increases in the graphite pricing at the moment. There are a couple of facts about our PGT operations in India. We're working with a wonderfully, technically very strong, capable group. We've had a number of visitors. I've had offtake partners from Germany and Europe visit our project in Europe, and they've all said one thing which has stuck with me wonderfully, is that it is the best expandable graphite operation they've seen in the world. And that's a comment coming from groups that have been in the industry for 40 or 50 years. So we're very proud it's built to high-class world standards, Western standards. It's a great operation. We're going to expand that at its capacity over the short term. The BAM project in battery anode material project in Europe, unlike what some of the media we see in Australia, the demand for alternative energy and EVs in Europe is exploding. It really is. There's a massive expansion. There's a need for graphite concentrate producers to supply material. We think we should be part of a development involved there. Interesting enough, when our engagement meeting, one of our meetings with the EU advisors in Brussels, was they're very curious about our plans for our BAM plant and very supportive of us developing that. So we started that discussion about potentially bringing our BAM plant into our global recognition as a key graphite supplier to the EU in the future. So that would be another wonderful outcome for the company. Those discussions have started and are moving along fairly well. A little bit about the board experience. I've been Heather Zampatti has been with us for around 4 years now. Very experienced non-executive chair. Heather's very experienced within the financial sector and a governance expert. I've been obviously in the graphite sector for around 10 years now as a finance director. I like to think I have a really strong understanding of the supply chains and the key players in the graphite sector. It's a niche market. There are a lot of operators in Asia, Europe and the US. There are key relationships to manage. We think we've got a really strong product with some really strong relationships globally. Warwick, very experienced company director and IR professional that many people will know of, and he's a great addition to our board. And Craig Lennon, a very experienced CFO, now CEO or MD of Nickel 28 Corporation, based in Brisbane, adds a lot of value from his corporate and governance experience in the sector. So, look, I guess that sort of sums up where we're at from an Evion perspective. We've got some key milestones we're working on around over the next few months. I really do see 2, 3 and 4 being concluded over the next quarter and a little bit more up to December 25 with a FID discussion toward the end of this year. It's an exciting period for us, having this support from key buyers, the EU, and the security around our project that's being offered by the Malagasy government. Very important to have that security of tenure with them, which we're working through. So look, as I've said a few times, the stars are aligning for us. It's looking very good for the short and medium term for our company. A little bit about us, where we're at financially. Obviously, we're really pleased to see our share price with some improvement over the last month. I like to think that's going to continue over the short term. Our cash position quoted was at March. Our cash position at the end of June as quoted was a tickle over $1 million, about 1.1 million Aussie. So we're in a strong position. We've got some options there. We're getting a bit of interest about them being exercised at the moment. We're in a good financial position going forward. That's a little bit about us, Gareth, and everyone online. Thanks for listening.
Thank you for that walkthrough, David. We'll now go immediately into the questions that have been received in the lead up to the webinar. I'll kick things off with the first question. Can you speak to any progress or timelines around financing for Mannery and how that fits into the broader EU strategic project status?
Yeah, we had a good question. I touched on it briefly in the presentation, Gareth. We had a good meeting. It was last Tuesday with our EU advisors. There was a panel of 4 or 5 people there working with us, and we went through at length, and I didn't share this on our screen, around our financial requirements and where we're at from a market perspective, our debt equity preferred mix, and the various grants that they're offering to us as well. And we've talked through that. They're very comfortable with what our plans are, what we'd like to achieve. They're very confident they're going to put together a package for us that'll work really well. They've invited me to, we're going to do a lot of work on this over the next month. They've invited me to attend, as I mentioned, a series of meetings with them in the back half of September. So I think toward the back half of September, October, we'll have a fair bit of news flow around that matter.
Okay, next question. With the India JV gaining traction, do you see that evolving into a standalone growth driver, or is it more of a strategic complement to Mannery?
Yeah, I think it was, look, it fills a market shortage. You know, we did some research a couple of years ago about the expandable graphite sector, and we've jumped into that market. It's not an easy market to enter for people who aspire to enter that market. You've got to have a really detailed understanding of the global supply chain of expandable graphite. The benefit to us is that we always could see that it would take around 10 to 15% of our own production from Mannery. So in some respect, we're our own offtake partner, which is a nice position to have that exposure and interest in downstream processing facility that's profitable. That's great. I see now with China's restrictions on exporting expandable graphite, US's demand, Europe's demand, Japan's demand, pricing for expandable graphite is increasing significantly. It's probably up around, I'd see around 20% this calendar year so far. That's working really well for us. So it's an exciting time for that part of our business over the short term.
Okay. Do you have an estimated timeline until grants/loans are approved by the EU? Can you provide an estimate on the value of the grant?
Yeah, look, we've been talking with the EU on our grant funding. Grant funding that's available under a number of the EU schemes. A lot of that is available on their various websites. We're fast tracking through those applications. You know, we've talked about some EU grants of, you know, around circa euro 3 million in the short term to help us with early development costs and community development costs. We're well advanced in those discussions. We've put in some applications. We've had numerous meetings about it. I'd like to think I'm going to have some news around that toward the back end of August. We're not far off concluding some of the detail on that.
Now, the DFS was completed a few years back. What price would be adjusted for inflation and driven demand for the upcoming plant in Madagascar?
Yeah, the DFS was done at a time, the tail end, you might remember, tail end of COVID, where their costs were pretty high in a lot of infrastructure construction costs. So they were incredibly high. Fuel costs at that time were incredibly high, but we had to adopt those prices. So our cursory review of the DFS inputs is that, you know, I don't see there'll be any material increase at all in many costs. If anything, there'll be some decreases in certain costs. Certainly in relation to our freight costs, our DFS had provided for about $5 million US in freight costs and infrastructure costs in getting our plant into Mannery. And that was done at a time when global freight rates were double what they are now. So we think there's a couple of $1 million US saving there at least. The infrastructure developments in country, which are well advanced now already, we think are going to save us. Graphite pricing, we took a well-informed view of pricing at that time. Pricing probably reduced a little bit in 2023, 24. I now see it being at a level that is really consistent with what we published in our DFS. In fact, medium long term, I think the pricing is going to be probably higher than what we'd outlined in our DFS.
Okay. Is India domestically embracing EV manufacturing, and what does this mean for Evion?
It creates opportunity, Gareth. India is the sleeping giant of the world economy in my mind. I've spent a fair bit of time there over the last year and a half, couple of years. It is a massive country. People ask me about Pune, and I explain that it's a small city inland from Mumbai, and its population is about 7 or 8 million people. So that's the sort of scale of, and Mumbai is a cosmopolitan, massive city in itself. There is massive expansion and growth of EVs in India. There are a lot of cars on the road. There's a lot of demand for energy. A lot of their energy at the moment is fueled by alternative fossil fuels, but that is shifting rapidly. The Indian government embracing and coordinating with various companies around the world about expansion of alternative energy and EVs. We're in a really strong position to look at supplying our material, expandable graphite, into growing industries in India. We're seeing a lot of growth in that sector. Even where we're based, not far from Pune, there is a lot of expansion, well-known industrial groups setting up in the area.
What's the expected date for mining approvals and European grants?
Mining approvals, well, we're waiting on really just a key document to be signed with the Madagascar government, which we expect to be executed in the short term. I've made some statements around that. I'm due to be in Madagascar in a couple of weeks' time to, let's hope, conclude that. That coincides with the mining licenses being issued around that time. So we're not far away, which is exciting. That's a key foundation for moving into development and construction.
How long will development of the Maneri mine take, and when specifically do you anticipate having funding in hand to begin construction?
Yeah, well, look, there's going to be, we hope we're going to avail ourselves of some grant funding in the short term. Then there'll be some funding. We're working very hard on funding over the next few quarters, working in obviously this quarter and then well into December. I'd like to think we will have, it's not something that can be done overnight. We've got to have the right funding partners, the right funding model, the right debt equity mix model established. We're going to be working with our local advisors and others over the next 6 months around that. Construction, we earmarked for around a 12 to a 15-month period. So we're very hopeful, given timeframes, we will be in production in the first half of 2027.
Okay. What is the impact of US tariffs on Asian markets with respect to Evion's graphite ambitions?
Yeah, look, it's created some dislocations, but worked well for us. Pricing is increased. Most of our material is going into Europe. Demand for our material out of Madagascar is really strong. Madagascar obviously has an incredibly low tariff regime with the US, much lower than that of China and other key supply markets. Madagascar is one of the key suppliers of graphite to the US at the moment already. People don't realise that, but they've been exporting graphite to Europe and the US for hundreds of years, a long time. There's well-established mines in the north that have been there for 100 years. We see demand growing in Madagascar's graphite sector a lot over the short term. We see the US tariff regime playing into our hands nicely as far as our development goes. Madagascar, just quickly and largely, Madagascar is now outside of China the largest producer and exporter of graphite globally. I don't see that changing in the short to medium term.
Okay. And one final question, perhaps, was asked by a number of attendees. And look, you may have answered it in the actual presentation, but it's not a bad note to end on. What upcoming catalysts do you see for share price growth for Evion?
Yeah, look, I think our discussions around, we've got some key achievements coming, looking to lock down over the next few weeks. I'll be in Madagascar over the balance of the end of August, hoping to secure and conclude mining licenses, expansion from exploration to mining licenses and development permits, formal environmental permit issues, concluding the back half of August. Around that time, and then following that, I'll be the Malagasy Mines Minister and his team will be coming to Australia in the first week of September, hopefully to coincide with some positive news flow from us. They'll be in Australia meeting with a delegation of politicians and other industry leaders in Australia, and I'll be part of those discussions. As I mentioned, the focus, I'll be in India in the middle of September at some stage, looking at our upgrade and taking some new offtake partners there around our stage 2 upgrade. And in the back half of September, I'll be in Europe with the EU. Before that, advancing offtake and financing discussions, but hopefully getting to the pointy end of a bit more detail around financing with the EU in the back half of September. So, look, the next 6 to 8 weeks is a pivotal period for the company to capitalise on all the good work over the last few years.
Well, that's a great note to end on, David. Thank you for your time this morning in providing an update to shareholders and attendees at this webinar. Just as a housekeeping note, there will be a recording made available on Evion's website as well as shared on LinkedIn and put on the YouTube channel. So for those who missed the webinar this morning, there will be an opportunity to access that later. And please send through any questions that will be on the tail end of that webinar, and we can answer them after the webinar. But thank you once again, David. That brings to conclusion our webinar this morning, and good luck for the next quarter.
Great. Thanks, Gary.